Okay, I'm Denise Carr. This is Homegrown Missouri, and it is January 26th, 2013, and we're going to do a workshop today on pressure canning soups, and we'll start it out. Okay, I have handouts here. We could pass those around. I have 9 copies. 4, 5, 6. I think I'll have just enough. So I can get other copies. I work upstairs during the week, so we can get other copies if we need them, if more people come in. So, this is a whole packet of information for you. We'll touch on some of this. The first thing I would like to ask is, who has done canning at all? Either water bath or pressure canning? Anybody? Only you. Okay. You've done a little, Amico? Okay. So everybody else this is brand new for them. Okay, generally when you start out canning, you can start with pressure canning, but it's usually a little bit easier if you start with water bath canning. I did not give you information on that today, because that's not what we're doing today. I have done a workshop in the past where I've done both water bath and pressure on the same day. It's a very, very long day for me. So we just decided to split it off, and people were very interested in doing soups. And at this time of year, soups is a good thing. Everybody likes eating soup in the wintertime when it's cold. But you have several things in your packet there. The first thing is Principles of Pressure Canning, and this has a step-by-step instructions, which is really nice. So that's the first thing.
Can you summarize what canning's for, what we use it for?
Well, canning is a method of preserving foods, and you can actually leave your jars, your sealed jars, sit on the shelves in your pantry. And this is some soups that I've done in the past, some just plain vegetable soup with no meat, and then this one is ham and bean. So they can sit on the counter just like that, or in your pantry, or it's a method of preserving food that after you're done with the canning does not use any energy. A lot of people like to freeze, but as long as you have electric, freezing's great. But if your electric goes out, you're going to lose whatever is in your freezer if it's extended period non-electric. Whereas canning, it can sit there and it can you can actually, if you wanted to, if you had to, you can eat it right from the jar if you follow the proper canning procedures. We generally like to heat ours up, but you could eat it right from the jar if you wanted to. And then, let's see, the next one, we're going to be talking about soups today. So I included just a single-page instruction sheet on canning soups. And soups is really a nice thing to start out with. A lot of times when you start canning, pressure canning, you might start with something like green beans, because green beans are easy. But soups are really pretty easy too. You have a lot of leeway with soups as long as you follow these general guidelines. And when we start talking about the actual soup, we'll talk about those. I included the recipe that my soup is loosely based on today. I say loosely because I think I added corn to mine and added some dried jalapenos that I had in my pantry and things. So, but I did include that in case you were interested in making this actual recipe. Then I have an avoiding common major and minor mistakes. The major mistakes are potentially deadly, so you really want to read through that. And we'll talk about a few of those things when we get into the actual making of the soup. And then the last page is the resources for further learning. If you really want to get into canning, there's some sites on there that will get you started off. Let's see here. The canning soup one-page sheet came from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and that is a really good site. You can go and look up, like I just put in soup, and I was able to go to this page, and that is on this page. So there's a lot of information on that site, but there's several different sites listed there for you. And then books. I'm a major book fiend. I love books. But if you're starting out and you've never canned before, this is the book to get. Okay, this is the most basic book, and this is a good starting point. It has water bath canning and pressure canning. It has freezing. It has a little bit on drying, I think, too, and not a whole lot. but for canning, it's invaluable. So if you can only buy one book, it runs about $8 to $10, I think now. This is the book to get. Okay. Then I have a few others here. This is my second favorite book, and only because it's also put out by a cooperative extension. This one is put out by the University of Georgia. This book you can order for yourself. It's got a ton of information in on canning, drying, freezing, and it's just a really helpful book. It runs about, I have on your handout there, it runs about $18. I have not checked the price recently. It may have gone up a little bit, but it's really a helpful book. It's got a lot of recipes that this one doesn't have. Okay. And then this is the other one that I really like. This one is also by Ball. This one has recipes that are not included in this, the little Ball Blue Book of Preserving. And it's got a couple of soup recipes in here. And next one I want to try is the split pea soup, because split pea is one of my favorites. So there's a split pea soup recipe in here. But this one has pretty pictures too, which the University of Georgia one does not. But there's some interesting looking stuff in here. You can see how I have my books all flagged for stuff that I use all the time, and these are my cheat sheets for other stuff. But today we're going to talk about pressure canning. And the reason that you would use pressure canning instead of water bath canning is if you have a low acid product. Your acid items are going to be any fruits, any kind of pickles that have vinegars. Generally pickles have vinegars, those are acid. Some tomato products, tomatoes you have to kind of be careful with because a lot of today's varieties of tomatoes are bred to be low acid. So you can water bath them. You need to follow the instructions in a reliable canning book and a current issue. This one is, I think, 2 or 3 years old. Don't use the one that your great-great-grandmother had, because things have really changed since then. Okay, so you want a current book. And tomatoes, they recommend adding either ascorbic acid or citric acid, I believe it is another thing, or vinegar, not vinegar, lemon juice. You could use a tablespoon of lemon juice also. And I've used all of those things, and I don't really prefer one over the other. I just whatever I have on hand. So, okay, so on the principles of pressure canning, a little bit. Let's see here. And it talks about, in here you can read this at your leisure because I know you can all read, so I'm not going to go over it word for word. Basic steps in pressure canning on the back side, page 2. Center the canner over the burner. This is a really wide canner here, and I have it about as centered as I can because we're next to the griddle over here. But what I have over here is I have the pressure canner heating up with the jars in it. By the way, to double stack, this one actually comes with 2 racks. So I can put a stack of pints in there, put the rack, and then another stack of pints. So it actually comes with that. So I have the jars in here, and everybody's familiar with canning jars, I'm assuming? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
The recent things that have shattered in the oven and so forth, do you buy just Ball canning jars? What kind of jars do you buy?
Yeah, actually, I haven't bought any jars in a while except for this one here. This is a 1.5 pints, and they just recently brought this back. This is one that was out years and years ago, and then they didn't have it anymore, so I have recently bought these, and this is Ball brand. Mm-hmm. Marie, in fact, got some jars from...
I recently bought some jars at Walmart, whatever their everyday brand or whatever that's called. And to be quite honest, the reason I got it is because it was a nice box, and I thought, oh good, I'm going to have something to keep my canning jars in. Did not look at the bottom and see that it was made in China. Now, we did a bunch of, about 16 pints of beets in that canner. And I didn't have any problem with the jars themselves, but the problem was with the lids. Their lids were so cheaply made that they were all buckled and everything.
When they came out of the canner, I was
And
like,
I
oh
didn't think
Lord,
they
what
were gonna
happened?
seal. They did seal, but they sounded like a train wreck when they sealed, instead of normally you just hear a little pop. This was a. So I would not recommend that you buy the Walmart Everyday or whatever that brand is called.
When she's talking about a
Chinese
box,
brand.
when she's talking about a box, this is what the ball jars come in now. They used to come in a real box that you could fold the flaps over and you could store them in. This is what they come in now because they said this is what consumers wanted, but they didn't ask me. So, because I don't like this, but I use it because that's what they come in. Most of my jars I got secondhand. You can find them at flea markets, thrift stores. I bought a bunch at thrift stores. I got a bunch from his one aunt who had jars and jars and jars and jars and jars of food that hadn't been used in many, many
You
years.
can find them on Craigslist, you can find them on eBay.
You
can get just about anything you want
quite
there.
frankly, the old jars, if you go looking for jars, if you go to like thrift stores or something, a lot of times the old jars, if you pick them up, they're a lot thicker. They're a lot heavier than the newer jars are today. The one thing you want to look at if you're buying them through the thrift store or flea markets, run your finger around the rim of the jar. Because if a jar is going to get nicked, this is where it's going to happen, okay? And this is your sealing surface. So this is the part that you want to make sure is completely intact, okay? So just run your finger around it. You can immediately feel if it's got a little nick in it. If it's got a little nick in it, I don't care if it's only 5 cents, it's not worth it. Unless you just want to store it on your shelf for dry stuff, because I do also dry things, and I put my dry stuff in jars that I don't necessarily use for canning. And you can use them for that. They just won't seal properly to use them for canning.
And we had a decorative jar with designs on it, and I was very suspicious of that, and I gave it away.
See, it used to be that you could, like for instance, mayonnaise used to come in really nice glass jars. My mom learned from my grandmother, and they always used mayonnaise jars or throwaway jars as long as a lid, two-piece lid, would fit. My mom did that for years and years. When I was in high school, I came home from school one day, and my mom was burned from here to here and was crying and upset. She had done some canning in she had some mayonnaise jars, and took them out of the canner and set them on the counter, and one of them exploded. And she had third-degree burns, even through her clothing, because it's that hot when it comes out of the canner. So when I'm pressure canning especially, I never ever use any jars but branded jars. So whether it's Ball brand or Kerr, some of my older ones, Atlas is one of them. In fact, I've got a couple of older ones in here. But I only, now if I'm going to water bath can and I'm really low on jars, which I'm usually not, but I'll use, you know, some of the heavier, old, I have some old mayonnaise jars that are a lot thicker than, well today you can't even find anything that lasted more, I don't think. So, but it used to be you could, but that, starting out, I think I'd probably invest in, you know, a couple boxes of really good jars.
And Ball was the best.
Well, Ball and Kerr, they're really all made by the same company.
Oh, okay.
They're all made by the same parent company. Used to be they were different, but they're not anymore. Jarden, J-A-R-D-E-N Brands is the parent company. So, and these that I got, these used to be out years and years and years ago, and then they took them away. And what's nice about this is it's halfway between a pint and a quart. So I threw one of them in here, because I think I have enough soup to fill 7 quarts, but if I don't, if there's still a little bit, I brought the pint and a half, and then I can use that instead of the quart, you know, and maybe won't have any left over, so. But sometimes I come right, you know, I fill up the right number of jars and I have nothing left over. Sometimes I don't. If you have a half a jar, just stick it in the fridge and use it for dinner, you know, the next day or two. Not really a good idea to can a half a jar, because a lot of the canning has to do with the air expelled from the jar as it's cooling. And if there's too much air in there, it may not expel properly and you may not get a good seal. Okay?
So
Yes.
do you always can, like right after you cook the food, or do you maybe like keep it in the fridge a few days, or?
Well, it depends. Like what I did with this, I've been preparing this all week. I do my own broth, so I had some chicken parts in the freezer that I got out at the beginning of the week, made my broth, and then I stuck that in the fridge. I also have some beans in this soup, some white beans, so I got them soaking. Cook them for 30 minutes, because when you're doing beans are a great thing to can because they really turn out good. They don't get real mushy or anything like that, but when you're doing beans, you have to rehydrate them if you're using dry beans. So I let them soak overnight, and then I cooked them the next day for 30 minutes, stuck them in the fridge. So that's what I've been doing all week to get ready for this. And then what you want to do, and if you look at the canning soup instructions, you are preparing the vegetables, your meat, or whatever you're using in it, you're preparing them ahead of time as if you were going to can them by themselves, okay? So most of the, like soups, you always, let's see what's going on over here. Whoa,
It finally got hot.
finally! We'll back that down a little bit, and we can back this down, because I think this is boiling too. Normally I'm used to my stove and cut it down to size, but use a different stove is lots of fun. Where was I? Okay, getting the stuff prepared. When you're ready to throw everything together, like when I came over here today, I had my beans in a bowl, I had my cut up onions in a bowl, I had my chicken that I pulled off the bones, I had the pot full of broth. Let's see, I put some corn in it, which is not on the recipe, I just added that to it. But I had those all in separate bowls. When I got here, I threw it all together in the pan and started heating it. Ideally, you want it to heat, just bring it to a boil and boil it for 5 minutes. Basically, you want, when it goes in the jars are hot because they're heating, you know, in the water, in the canner. When it goes in the jars, you want your liquid to be hot, okay? There's 2 reasons for that. The jars are hot. That helps with the seal, and the soup itself, if it goes in cold, it takes that much longer for the center of that item to actually come up to heat. Okay, and the heat is what kills any botulism spores or anything like that. Okay, which is why we're pressure canning. Pressure canning, because it's under pressure when it's in the canner, actually raises the temperature above 212, which is the normal temperature of boiling water. And they have actually done a lot of research, the extension offices have done a lot of research as to how long something has to be at that pressure, you know, whether it's 240 degrees or whatever, when it's under pressure, in order to kill off those bad bacteria spores, to make it so that it can sit on the counter without being refrigerated or anything like that. Okay?
And what did they come up with? How long?
It's different for everything, which is why you need to follow a recipe, especially when you're starting out. Definitely, with the soups you have a little bit of leeway, but and you still have to follow the instructions, you know, that I gave you on your handout for your soups that you're doing. Follow those instructions, and then you'll be good to go. And when we actually put it in the jars, you'll see how we do that too. So I've got the jars heating, and don't do like I did once, and I didn't have enough water in my water bath canning. My water bath canner, so I was like, I'll add a little bit more. So I poured water in there not thinking, and one of the jars exploded because they're hot, you know, when they're in the canner. These jars I did not sterilize beforehand. They're going in a pressure canner for 75 minutes. They will become sterilized in that pressure canner when the food is in them. If you are going to can something that's, like say you have water bath canner and you're going to do it for less than 10 minutes, you want to sterilize your jars ahead of time. You can do that in a dishwasher and then just keep them hot. Or you can do it right in the canner is what I usually do. Throw my jars in there and do it in there.
How many minutes of boiling does it take?
For sterilizing, boy, I didn't look that up. I believe it's like 10 minutes. That's a better piece. I believe it's like 10 minutes. Let me look that up for you, and I can tell you that for sure afterward. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Okay, when you're canning, whether you're doing water bath canning or pressure canning, you need to know your altitude. Okay, up to 1,000 feet, you use a certain chart in the canning books that you use. And I know where I live, it's like 900 something. Now it's different, like you guys up on the plateau, you may be above 1,000. So some of the recipes will have you adjust the timing or even the pressure, depending on your altitude. So you do want to know that. And I've actually looked mine up on the NOAA website, the NOAA weather website, if you don't already know it. And if you call your extension office, if you're familiar with the county extension office, they could usually tell you too. But you'll see in the instructions, they tell you 0 to 2,000 feet on this particular one. Some of them are 1,000 feet. It just depends on your recipe. Okay, so you want to follow your recipe. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm getting my jars hot. My soup is cooking. So that is hot. The other thing I'm getting hot, let me turn them back up here. Okay, the 2-piece lids. There's 2-piece lids on your can. Okay, this is the lid that you have to buy every time. Okay, you should not reuse these lids. You will see all over the internet people say they've recooked them and they've reused them. It's not worth it. Start with new lids. Okay, generally you can go into Walmart and you can buy them for a dozen. They're probably about $2 or $3 for a dozen of them. I buy mine in bulk, which is why you'll see mine don't have any writing on. The bulk ones are just plain metal. And I buy them.
And that's the part in mine that was the
That
failure.
wrinkled.
That
Yeah.
was the cheap stuff from China, so make sure you get ball or clear or a good one.
Yeah, usually, and you might, like even during the canning season, which, you know, you can can all year long, but during the quote canning season, you can even find them at Dollar General. And that brand is Golden Harvest, and I have used that brand over the years. And those lids are a little bit cheaper. I think they run probably a little under $2, I believe, a box. I haven't bought any in a while because I buy them in bulk, but they do have them during the season. We have a new Tractor Supply. Tractor Supply has a whole gamut of jars and lids and canning stuff. Oh, they don't have them?
I didn't see any,
Oh,
but
really?
maybe it's because it's not seasoned yet.
Okay, it could be.
I was over there the other day and I
Okay.
didn't see any, I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, because that's where I got the pint and a half. I bought a bunch of those at Tractor Supply. Not here because it just opened, but at another one.
Now,
So-
they had a catalog, which I kicked myself for not getting there, because it might be the situation where you could order them and then have them delivered there and pick them up there and no shipping.
But during the quote season, you can usually find them there. And then the jars, when you buy the jars, they will actually come with this flat lid and this ring, okay? So they'll come with all of that, and those lids are new. You can use those lids. But then when you do your next batch of canning, that's when you'll need to buy your replacement lids. Or if you go to the thrift stores and you find just the jars, you know, you'll need to buy actually both pieces, okay? And you can buy them either way. You can buy just the lid, or you can buy the lid with the ring if you don't have the rings. When you start buying jars and you start canning, you're going to have more of these than you know what to do with, because they don't live on the jars in the cabinet, okay? You take the ring actually off the jar, and the reason for that is if there's a little bit of moisture in the air or anything like that, if you have that lid on there and screwed down tight, they can actually rust fast to the lid, and actually cause your lid to rust, which is you're gonna lose your seal, okay?
Another question, the old blue canning jars, are they safe?
You know, I have some of those, and I really use those for dry products, only because the ones that I have are well loved. They have a lot of scratches on them and things. They probably do fine. What I have found with the really, really old jars is the glass is so thick that there's a few of them that I have that I can't get a good seal from. So I usually use those for like storing dry things on the, when I dry stuff, you know, I'll use them for that. Cause they're pretty, you know, they're really pretty. If you have some and the lid fits on there properly, it'd be the kind of thing where if I had a bunch of them and I want to try, I might just try one. And then that way, if that one doesn't seal, I can put that in the fridge and use it, you know, the next day or two. So, but these, you need to use these when they go in the canner, but then you take them off once they have to sit for 24 hours and then you can take them off. And if you have a good seal, I mean, it's not coming open, okay? In fact, generally, I will save these lids only to like use them for dry things. You can use them for that. And the best way to do that, instead of prying them up with a can opener, if you take a spoon and just kind of, let me grab one here. If you take a spoon, and I'm not going to do it, but you can get the spoon right in the ridge there and just twist, and that won't actually ruin the lid so that you can use it for dry things, which is why I have this one on here, because that actually came off of something else. If you use a can opener, it's going to kind of twist it and you won't be able to reuse it for that. But never reuse them for canning purposes, okay?
I like to keep them on, once the jar is clean, I store them with them.
Yeah, some people do.
So that they stay cleaner and you don't have to worry about washing them all.
And usually what I do with mine, I have a lot of my jars in tubs because they didn't come with boxes. They just came with food, but not boxes. So when I wash them, I put them upside down in those tubs, and those tubs have lids on. They get well sterilized in here, so I'm usually not too worried about them. But that is a good way to store them if you have a box like that. You know, you want to store them that way. Any other questions on jars or lids or that sort of thing? No? Okay.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
When you were talking about the beans,
Uh-huh.
you said you only cook them for 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So does that mean that when anything that you're canning, you can count that canning time as part of your cooking? You know what I'm saying? Like you're gonna put the soup in there, but the beans aren't really quite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, because it's under pressure, it's kind of like you were saying, a pressure cooker. When you put something in a pressure cooker, it cooks that much faster. Yeah, in fact, when I served this ham and bean soup, I did several jars of just the white beans. Because I want my ham and bean soup thick. You can see how thin this is. And I want it thick. So I take those jars of white beans, mash up that one jar, and then add this to it. And they are nice and soft when they come out of the canner. They still hold their shape, but you can mash them really easily, so they'll be well cooked. But soups are really awesome because the fact that you're cooking them in the pressure cooker or canner really makes the flavors meld together, and there's not a better soup out there. I just love them. So, and it makes the house smell good.
How about seasoning? Are you going to put the seasoning?
Yes, in fact, I actually have the seasoning in there. I added, let me see. In that particular one, this is a white chicken chili, it's called. In that one, I used some of my dried jalapeno that I did in the summertime. I used canned diced green chilies, ground cumin, which is my favorite spice in the entire world. So I went a little heavy on that. And I did dried oregano and cayenne. Now this recipe calls for cloves, which is a little odd to me in a soup, so I didn't use that. With the seasonings, you can kind of change them based on your liking. I generally go light on the salt because I like to, if I open it and it needs more salt, I can put it on at the table or when I reheat it. So I did put a little salt in there, but not a lot. Because I use my own stock, my own chicken broth too, and I don't salt that. So, if you start canning, you will find that you are eating way less sodium than you are if you buy things at the store. Even if you salt it at the table, which we generally don't, because there's so much flavor in it, you don't really have to. But you're going to use way less salt than if you would go to the store and buy cans of soup or whatever it is that you're doing. So, my vegetables I can completely without salt. Things like pickles, if you're doing pickles, that's a large aspect of the pickle is salt. So, you know, you do use salt in those, but almost you know, other than soups, I don't really use salt in anything else I do. Let's cook in here. Let's turn that down a little bit. Okay, any other questions on just general things? Then we'll talk about this step by step over here. Nothing? Okay. If you go to your page then that has on the soup, we'll talk about that a little bit before we kind of, I hope we can all kind of move over here while I do this. I guess I didn't mention the fact that you do need to, on your flat lids, if you saw on there, there's a red ring of rubber around on this flat lid. In order to get that to seal properly on the jar, you have to start by heating them up. And if you read the package directions, it'll tell you on that brand of lids what you should do with them. I don't think any of the brands say to actually boil them, but they should be in very hot water. Usually I'll let mine start to bubble a little bit and then turn it way down. And just keep them hot while the rest of your stuff is coming up to temperature. So that's the way you start that. Okay. Then on your canning soups page, at the very top it says vegetable, dried beans, or peas, meat, poultry, or seafood soup can be canned. Which is what makes this a nice thing to start with, because you can, use a recipe as long as you follow these guidelines. Or you can use the recipe that I included there. Except for the cloves. I did not put cloves in mine. And I did add corn to mine. So. And that's really your own preference. When you do canned soups, though, you do not want to add noodles or other pasta. They will literally disintegrate from being in that pressure canner. When you go to heat it up, if you want to put noodles in it, say if you make a chicken soup base, you can put your noodles in when you heat it up. Okay? So you don't want to add anything like that. You don't want to add rice, no flour, no cornstarch. You don't want anything to thicken it. So like I said, I love ham and bean soup really thick, but this is not thick. If you make a soup thick, it may not heat properly to the center of the jar. And when they timed these, when they did their research and did the timing, they made sure that in the center of the jar it had that certain temperature that it needed for a certain period of time. So if you make them too thick, it may not get that hot in the center. Okay? So you want them to be really liquid. You don't want to add milk. Milk would curdle in a pressure canner or even a water bath. So you don't want to add anything like that. You can add that after you open it. If you have, say, one of the recipes I have is for a clam chowder base, and it's got everything in it except the thickener and the milk. You add that when you heat it. Okay, and then it'll tell you the specifics. You want to select, wash, and prepare vegetables as if meat and poultry as described for the specific foods. And what that means is, in this book, if you're putting corn in, it'll tell you how to prepare the corn, it'll tell you how to prepare all the different items that you're putting in there. Okay?